The wedding march began to play, and I was holding Xie Yinnan's arm, standing at the end of the red carpet at the entrance of the banquet hall. The moment the lights hit me, the entire banquet hall fell silent. I could feel countless gazes stabbing into me like needles, some surprised, some stunned, some utterly disbelieving. I lifted my chin slightly, a perfectly measured smile curving at the corners of my lips, and stepped forward 1 foot at a time on the red carpet, the train of my wedding dress dragged behind me, a full 3 meters long, studded with countless diamonds that shimmered like scattered stars under the lights, as if I had spread a Milky Way in my wake. Xie Yinnan turned his head and glanced at me, whispering, nervous. I shook my head gently, my gaze sweeping over the main table at the front of the banquet hall, then deliberately lowered my voice and said, "What do I have to be nervous about? The one who should be nervous isn't me." I said it just loud enough for the guests at the 2 nearby tables to hear. I saw several of the Shen family relatives whispering among themselves, barely containing their excitement. Right, they had been waiting for this drama for half a year, and at that moment, in another corner of the banquet hall, someone was enduring the longest minute of his life. Gu Mingxiu stood near the side entrance, a woman in a pink cocktail dress on his arm, his so-called white moonlight. Lu Yi, the one he had secretly married abroad, he had come to attend his good buddy Xie Yinnan's wedding, his mood light and carefree, even a little smug. After all, he thought the thing he had done was flawless, that Shinqinghe had been completely fooled. Still in the dark, waiting for him to come back, he thought he had won. But the moment the bride appeared, Gu Mingxiu felt as if someone had dumped a bucket of ice water over him. The wine glass he had been holding froze midair, his face shifting from normal to pale, then from pale to ghostly white, his lips parted slightly, then closed again, his Adam's apple bobbing up and down several times, but not a single word came out. That woman in the wedding dress, she was too familiar. No, not just familiar, that was Shinqinghe, the Shinqinghe he had been planning to go back and keep deceiving after secretly marrying another woman abroad, the Shinqinghe he thought was still in the dark, obediently waiting for him to come back and hold their wedding, the Shinqinghe who was his fiancé. No, ex-fiancé, but how could she be here? How could she be wearing a wedding dress? How could she be holding Xie Yinnan's arm? Wasn't she supposed to be waiting for him? A thunderclap seemed to explode in Gu Mingxiu's mind, roaring and buzzing. He whipped his head around to look at Lu Yi, only to find her expression even uglier than his. Lu Yi gripped his arm tightly, her nails almost digging into the fabric of his suit sleeve, her lips trembling as she whispered, "Mingxiu, what's going on?" Gu Mingxiu didn't answer her. He couldn't even spare the thought. He yanked his arm free from Lu Yi's grasp and took a step forward, wanting to rush up and demand an explanation, but he had only taken 2 steps when a hand reached out from the side and firmly pressed down on his shoulder. He turned around and saw his mother, Tao Roland's face. Tao Roland was dressed in a dark green cheongsam, her hair swept up immaculately, 2 round pearl earrings dangling from her earlobes. She exuded an air of dignified elegance, her presence so oppressive it was suffocating. She looked at her son, her expression unreadable, neither anger nor disappointment, but more like a cold, bone-deep calm. She yanked Gu Mingxiu back to his seat, then lowered her voice, her tone as icy as the early winter wind. Tao Roland said, "Mingxiu, don't you think the bride looks familiar?" Those words stabbed into Gu Mingxiu's chest like a knife. He opened his mouth, his voice hoarse as if it were being squeezed out of his throat. "Mom, what's going on? How could how could she marry Xie Yinnan?" Tao Roland finished his sentence for him, then let out a cold, mocking laugh. "What, you think it's okay for you to secretly get married abroad, but Qinghe can't break off the engagement and marry someone else? There's no such logic in this world." Gu Mingxiu's face went completely white. He whipped his head back toward the end of the red carpet. Qinghe had already reached the main stage. Xie Yinnan held her hand, carefully helping her up the steps, and the two stood side by side under the arch covered in white roses, the scene so beautiful it looked like it had been cut from a magazine cover. Qinghe tilted her head slightly, her gaze sweeping unerringly toward Gu Mingxiu's direction, and then the corner of her mouth curled up slightly, as if she had spotted an irrelevant acquaintance. That glance, light, airy, as if she were looking at thin air, but Gu Mingxiu felt as if someone had grabbed his heart and squeezed it tight. He stared at Qinghe's face, his mind uncontrollably flashing back to that scene half a year ago. Back then, he was on a plane to Switzerland, with Lu Yi sitting beside him. Lu Yi rested her head on his shoulder, her fingers tracing circles on his chest, her voice syrupy sweet as she asked him, "Mingxiu, what if we secretly get married? Do you think Qinghe would lose her mind?" What had he said back then? "She won't find out when we get back." The Engagement goes on as planned, marry for the alliance, cooperate for business, just stay in the shadows, and I promise you'll lack nothing. He thought his scheme was flawless, the alliance between the Shin and Gu families couldn't be broken, Shin Qinghe carried the weight of the entire Shin group's resources, so he had to marry her, but his true love was Lu Yi, so before the wedding, he'd marry her first, give her a title. Even if it was one that could never see the light of day, he thought he could pull the wool over everyone's eyes, but now, watching Shin Qinghe in her wedding dress standing beside Xie Yannan, it hit him like a freight train. He was the one who'd been played for a fool all along. Tao Rulin watched her son's shattered expression, her face utterly unreadable. She picked up the teacup from the table, took a delicate sip, and said unhurriedly, "What, did you think Qinghe knew nothing?" Gu Mingxiu whipped his head around to stare at her, his eyes bloodshot. "Mom, you knew all along, you knew she was going to marry Xie Yannan." Tao Rulin set down the teacup and lifted her eyes to meet his. There was no pity in that gaze, no guilt, only a cold, bitter disappointment. "I not only knew, I prepared her dowry myself. I personally went to the Shin family to negotiate the broken engagement, and I smiled through the whole thing to smooth things over with old Master Shin, Gu Mingxiu." "Did you really think your little stunt fooled anyone?" Gu Mingxiu froze, his mouth hung open, but no words came out. And at that moment, on the stage, the MC raised the microphone and announced in a booming voice, "Let's give the warmest round of applause to welcome the groom, Mr. Xie Yannan, and the bride, Ms. Shin Qinghe." Applause surged like a tidal wave, flooding Gu Mingxiu's ears from every direction. He stood on the outskirts of the crowd, like a rock battered by the waves, stiff, frozen, unable to move. He saw Xie Yannan lean down and whisper something in Shin Qinghe's ear. She curved her lips into a smile, warm and radiant, a look he'd never seen on her before. He'd been engaged to Shin Qinghe for nearly 2 years, and he'd always thought she was a proper but cold woman, her smiles always polite and distant. She'd never smiled like this before, with her eyes crinkling at the corners. When Xie Yannan slipped the ring onto her finger, Shin Qinghe's hand was steady, without a hint of hesitation. The diamond caught the light and flashed, the gleam slicing right across Gu Mingxiu's eyes, making him squint involuntarily. That tiny motion felt like a knife cutting open his heart. His gaze locked onto Shin Qinghe's ring finger. That finger had once worn the engagement ring he'd given her, a modest 3-carat ring he'd picked out at a jewelry store without even letting her choose the design. She hadn't said a word back then, just glanced at it briefly and put it on later. He found out she'd tucked that ring into a velvet box and left it on the nightstand in his room at the Gu family mansion, without even a note. When Tao Rulin mentioned this to him, her tone was as calm as if she were talking about the weather. "Qinghe is a woman of class. She didn't make a scene when she broke off the engagement, packed everything neatly, and even gave each servant a red envelope before she left. Gu Mingxiu, you don't deserve her." When Gu Mingxiu heard those words, it felt like his backbone had been ripped out. He propped himself up with one hand on the edge of a nearby table, his fingertips turning white from the pressure. Lu Yi tugged at his sleeve, her voice choked with tears. "Mingxiu, what's wrong with you? Say something." He jerked his hand away. Too hard. Lu Yi stumbled back, nearly falling. She steadied herself by grabbing a chair, and the hurt on her face instantly shifted to terror, because in Gu Mingxiu's eyes, she saw something she'd never seen before: regret. And not far away, Tao Rulin watched it all unfold. Taking another sip of her tea, a faint, almost imperceptible sneer curling at the corner of her lips, her gaze drifted past her son, landing on the couple on stage. Shin Qinghe was leaning sideways, talking to Xie Yannan, her smile bright and effortless, radiating a vibrant confidence from head to toe. Tao Rulin gave a slight nod, as if mentally giving that scene a perfect score. Then she withdrew her gaze, glanced at her son, and said flatly, "Sit down. The wedding has only just begun." Chapter 2, Your White Moonlight, My Ex-Fiancé. The MC's voice rang out from the stage, brimming with enthusiasm. "Now, let's give a warm round of applause to welcome the bride and groom for their speeches." Applause erupted again. I turned around, took the microphone from the MC, and slowly swept my gaze across the entire venue. The banquet hall was set with over 30 tables, mostly filled with relatives and friends from the Shin and Xie families. The Gu family members were seated at the tables near the edges, not a bad spot, but definitely not the head table treatment. I spotted Gu Mingxiu sitting there, his face looking like someone had sucked the soul right out of him. I gave the microphone a soft blow to make sure it was working, then broke into a smile. thank you all for coming to my wedding with Yan Nan today. Actually, many of you here know that half a year ago, my fiancé wasn't Xia Yan Nan. The moment the words left my mouth, the entire hall fell into a dead silence. I kept smiling. Half a year ago, I still had an engagement, and who it was with. Many of you here know that too. Gu Mingxiu, the eldest young master of the Gu Corporation. We were engaged for 2 years. The wedding date was set, the invitations were printed, and then, I paused, my gaze landing squarely on Gu Mingxiu's face. His complexion couldn't even be described as pale anymore. It was the ashen gray of someone on the verge of death. Louis sat beside him, gripping the tablecloth so hard her knuckles had turned white. I looked away, my tone as light as if I were chatting about the weather. Then my ex-fiancé, while still engaged to me, took another woman to Switzerland and secretly got a marriage license. He thought I didn't know. He thought he could pull the wool over my eyes. But in this world, there's no such thing as a wall that doesn't let the wind through, is there? A stifled commotion rippled through the crowd. Someone gasped sharply, others whispered to each other, and a few of the Shin family elders clapped hard. Loud, crisp applause. As if to bolster my courage, I took a brown paper envelope from Xia Yan Nan, opened it unhurriedly, and pulled out a stack of photocopies. I held the papers up, waved them at the audience, then let them go. The sheets fluttered down like snowflakes, scattering across the red carpet in front of the stage and landing at the guests' feet. These are copies of Mr. Gu Mingxiu and Ms. Louis' marriage certificate from Switzerland. The date is crystal clear. It falls right during the time I was still engaged to Gu Mingxiu. Feel free to take a look yourselves and see just how impressive Mr. Gu's time management skills are. A few guests in the front rows bent down to pick up the copies from the floor, huddled together to glance at them, and then looked up at Gu Mingxiu with completely changed expressions. Those looks held contempt, pity, and above all, a thrill of schadenfreude. Gu Mingxiu shot to his feet. His chair toppled backward with a jarring crash. He stared at me on the stage, his lips trembling several times before he finally forced out words. "Shinqinghe," he said, "when did you find out?" I tilted my head, smiling at him, my voice unbearably gentle. "I knew the day after you left for Switzerland. Who did you think you were fooling? You booked the tickets using the Gu Corporation's company account, and your entry and exit records clearly show who you went through customs with, Gu Mingxiu. Did you really think I, Shinqinghe, was an idiot?" His face completely crumbled. He opened his mouth to say something else, but another voice cut him off. Xia Yan Nan walked up from behind me, naturally positioning himself between me and Gu Mingxiu. He was half a head taller than Gu Mingxiu, with broad shoulders, standing there like a silent wall. He looked at Gu Mingxiu with a very faint expression, impossible to read, neither anger nor joy. "Mingxiu," Xia Yan Nan said, "today is our wedding. If you want to make a scene, pick another day, another place. I'll be there." Gu Mingxiu seemed ignited by those words. His eyes instantly turned red, and he shoved the chair in front of him aside, striding toward the stage while shouting, "Xia Yan Nan, you're my brother. When did you hook up with her? How long have you two been sneaking around behind my back?" Xia Yan Nan didn't move. He didn't even furrow his brow. He just slightly turned his head to glance at me, a look that seemed to say, "See, I told you he'd ask that." I patted Xia Yan Nan's arm, signaling him to let me handle it. Then I stepped forward. Looking down at Gu Mingxiu standing below the stage, he craned his neck up at me, the veins on his neck bulging one by one, as if they might burst through the skin. "Gu Mingxiu, watch your mouth. What do you mean by hooking up? There's nothing shady between me and Yan Nan. When you took that woman abroad and secretly got the marriage certificate, I was still engaged to you. He wasn't. Who are you to me, and who is he to you? What right do you have to interrogate him here?" Gu Mingxiu choked on my words, his mouth hung open, his chest heaving violently, but not a single sound came out. I bent down, lowering my voice until only he could hear. "What, you're allowed to sneak off and get hitched behind my back, but I can't break off the engagement and marry someone else. Gu Mingxiu, I've known you for 2 years, and this is the first time I've seen you be such a hypocrite." His eyes turned red, not the red of anger, a red of near collapse. He reached out to grab the hem of my dress, but Xia Yan Nan caught his wrist in a firm grip. Xia Yan Nan's hand was strong. Gu Mingxiu struggled but couldn't break free, his expression shifting from broken to pathetic. Xia Yan Nan released his wrist and spoke calmly. "Mingxiu, when I met Qinghe, she had already called off the engagement. Get your timeline straight. Don't sling mud at her." His voice was steady, like he was stating a fact, but every word was like a nail, hammering into Gu Mingxiu's chest one by one. I straightened up, took the microphone Again, and my voice returned to its initial composure. Everyone, I have no guilt toward Gu Mingxiu, he has his moonlight, and I have my choice. Standing here today, marrying Xie Yannan, is a decision I, Shen Qinghe, made after careful thought, not out of spite. You all know Yannan better than I do, he's no one's replacement, he's my husband. When I said those last 4 words, I turned my head and glanced at Xie Yannan. He was looking at me too, a faint smile in his eyes. That smile was subtle, yet it outshone all the flowers and lights at the wedding. Applause erupted again, louder than ever. The relatives from the Shen family's tables all stood up. Shen Jinshan sat at the main table, holding his wine glass, his expression a mix of pride and something unreadable. Beside him were Xie Yannan's parents, both with red-rimmed eyes, nodding fervently, and Gu Mingxiu stood there, like a discarded stone statue. His eyes were locked on me, his lips trembling non-stop, as if he wanted to say something, but all the words were stuck in his throat. I turned and handed the microphone back to the MC, then took Xie Yannan's arm again. Xie Yannan leaned down and whispered something in my ear. I curved my lips into a smile, then tilted my head, deliberately letting my gaze drift to Tao Rulin, who was standing not far behind Gu Mingxiu. Tao Rulin had been sitting there the whole time, never moving from her spot. She held her teacup, her expression as calm as still water. Only when our eyes met did I catch a faint curve at the corner of her mouth. It was so small that only I could see it. Then she set down her teacup, stood up, smoothed the hem of her qipao, and slowly walked toward Gu Mingxiu. As she passed him, she paused. She didn't look at him, just stared straight ahead, her tone like she was talking to herself. Tao Rulin said, "Sit down. The way you're acting now, you're disgracing the Gu family." Gu Mingxiu didn't move. It was like he hadn't heard her, frozen in place, his eyes still fixed on me on the stage. Tao Rulin finally turned to look at him. There was no pity, no anger in that gaze, only a deep disappointment. Gu Mingxiu, I've raised you for 28 years, and this is the first time I've thought you were this stupid. With that, she walked away without looking back, heading toward the main table. She stopped in front of Shen Jinshan, raised her glass, and smiled slightly. "Brother Shen, let's have a drink. It's time to turn the page on the kids' matters." Shen Jinshan stood up and clinked glasses with her. The 2 elders exchanged a knowing glance, then each tipped their heads back and drained their drinks. And at that moment, Lu Yi was still sitting in the corner. She hadn't made a sound the entire time, but her expression had shifted from initial terror to a dark, brooding look, and then to a shadowy smugness. Her hand rested on her lower abdomen, gently stroking it, a slight smirk curling at the corner of her mouth. She knew her trump card hadn't been played yet, and she believed that once she laid it out, this wedding would turn into a joke. What she didn't know was that I was waiting for her to reveal that card. Chapter 3, The Dignity I Gave You, you threw on the ground. Tao Rulin finished the glass of wine with Shen Jinshan, then turned and walked toward the stage. Her back was ramrod straight as she moved, her high heels making no sound on the carpet, carrying an aura of authority that demanded respect without a word. The MC saw her approaching and instinctively stepped aside. Tao Rulin took the microphone from my hand and turned to face the entire room. She cleared her throat, her voice not loud, yet it carried clearly to every corner of the banquet hall. Tao Rulin said, "Dear friends and family, I am Tao Rulin, the matriarch of the Gu family. Today, taking advantage of the Xia and Shen family's wedding banquet, I have a few announcements to make." The entire room fell silent again, everyone's gaze locked onto Tao Rulin. Even Gu Mingxiu jerked his head up, his expression shifting from collapse to a terrified premonition. Tao Rulin didn't spare her son a glance. Her tone was steady and calm, as if she were reading from a pre-drafted document. "First, Gu Mingxiu secretly obtained a marriage certificate with another person while still bound by a marital agreement, breaching the betrothal and losing both trust and virtue. From today onward, he is no longer the heir of the Gu group." These words hit like a thunderbolt, exploding with a bang across the banquet hall. The relatives at the Gu family's tables all stood up. Some gasped, others slammed the table, and a few of the older elders glared at Gu Mingxiu with ashen faces. As for Gu Mingxiu himself, it was as if all his strength had been drained away. He staggered back a step, his back hitting the edge of the table with a dull thud. Lu Yi shot to her feet, the color draining from her face in an instant. She shrieked, "No, you can't do this." Tao Rulin didn't even glance at her and continued, "Second, all of Gu Mingxiu's shares will be transferred from today to the Gu family's eldest daughter, Gu Mingxian. Gu Mingxiu himself will no longer hold any shares in the Gu group, nor will he hold any position in the company. Gu Mingxiu's sister, Gu Mingxian, was sitting at a table near the main one. She froze for a moment upon hearing this, but quickly regained her composure. Nodding slightly as if accepting an arrangement that was only natural, Tao Rulin went on. Third, regarding Miss Lu Yi, she finally turned her gaze to Lu Yi. That look was indifferent, as if she were examining something utterly insignificant. Lu Yi felt deeply uncomfortable under that stare and instinctively shrank back behind Gu Mingxiu. Tao Rulin said, Miss Lu, you got a marriage certificate with Gu Mingxiu abroad, and legally, you are his wife, but you will never enter the Gu family's door. Your name will never appear on the Gu family's household register. You won't get a single cent of the Gu family's assets. This is the Gu family's decision, and it is also my decision as the matriarch. Do you have any objections? Lu Yi's face shifted from white to green, from green to purple, and finally to a twisted red. She clenched her teeth, her chest heaving violently, her voice squeezing out through gritted teeth. On what grounds? I'm carrying the Gu family's child. I am the rightful Mrs. Gu. At these words, Tao Rulin finally showed a hint of expression on her face. It was a cold sneer. Rightful, Miss Lu, do you think what you've done is rightful? A girl, throwing herself at a man who was still engaged, flying abroad to secretly get a marriage certificate. Does that count as rightful? If your parents were still alive, I wonder if they'd blush for you. Lu Yi was shaken by these words, trembling all over. She opened her mouth several times to retort, but each time, the words died in her throat. Because she saw everyone present staring at her, those gazes held no sympathy, only contempt. Gu Mingxiu finally seemed to snap out of it. He grabbed Tao Rulin's arm, his voice hoarse and almost unrecognizable. Mom, you can't do this. I'm your own son. Are you going to destroy me for an outsider? Tao Rulin looked down at his hand, then pried his fingers off one by one. Her movements were gentle but firm, like clearing away an obstacle that displeased her. Gu Mingxiu, I'm not doing this for anyone. I'm doing it for the Gu family. What you've done has made the Gu family unable to hold its head up in front of the Shen family, in front of the Xie family, and in front of the entire circle. If your father were still alive, you know better than I do what he would do. At the mention of Gu Mingxiu's father, Gu Mingxiu froze completely. His father, Gu Yuanshan, had passed away 3 years ago. On his deathbed, he had held Tao Rulin's hand and entrusted the entire Gu family to her. Tao Rulin had carried the burden alone for 3 years, managing the Gu group with flawless efficiency and never bowing her head in the business world, and now, her own son had, in the most foolish way, thrown away all her dignity. Tao Rulin smoothed the sleeve he had crumpled, turned around, and handed the microphone back to the MC. Then she walked back to the head table, picked up her teacup again, gently blew on the tea leaves floating on the surface, and took a sip, as if she were enjoying an ordinary afternoon tea. And I stood on the stage, never saying a word the entire time. I just tilted my head slightly, watching the scene unfold, my expression faint. Xie Yinnan's hand remained on my waist, the warmth of his palm seeping through the fabric of my wedding dress, warm and steady, reassuring. Then I heard Lu Yi laugh. Her laughter was sharp, like glass scraping against tiles, piercing enough to make my eardrums ache. Laughing, she stood up from her seat, one hand resting on her slightly swollen belly, and slowly walked to the open space in the center of the banquet hall. Lu Yi said, Good, very good, Shenqinghe, you win. You found yourself a powerful backer, married a good man, and even pulled the Gu family over to your side to deal with me. You're impressive, I admit it. She paused, her gaze cold and fixed on me, the corners of her mouth slowly curling upward. Lu Yi said, But have you ever thought about this? The child in my belly carries the Gu family's bloodline. Even if the Gu family won't acknowledge me as their daughter-in-law, they can't just deny their own grandson, can they? When she said this, her tone carried a smug certainty. She knew that traditional wealthy families valued offspring above all else, especially a family like the Gu family, with the old man gone and the family line thinning. Even if Tao Rulin were ruthless, she couldn't possibly reject her own grandson. Sure enough, as soon as she finished speaking, the Gu family's tables erupted in hushed murmurs. A white-haired old lady stood up, trembling, and said, Rulin, the child is innocent. Whatever the issue, take it home and discuss it behind closed doors. Don't make a scene out here. Tao Rulin's hand, holding the teacup, paused slightly. The pause was brief, but Lu Yi caught it. The curve of her lips deepened, her hand stroking her belly back and forth, her expression shifting from sinister to pitiful. She turned to face the entire room of guests, her eyes reddening. Tears coming on cue. Lu Yi said, Uncles and aunties, I know you all look down on me, thinking I'm the other woman, but Mingxiu and I truly love each other. He never loved Qinghe. Their engagement was just a business merger, arranged by both families. Mingxiu never liked her from start to finish. I just fell in love with someone. What did I do wrong? She spoke with tears streaming down her face, utterly pitiful, and with her fragile appearance. A few guests who didn't know the truth actually showed sympathetic expressions. She sniffled and continued, all I'm asking now is for the Gu family to acknowledge the child in my belly. This is Mingxiu's flesh and blood, and it's the Gu family's bloodline. You can reject me, but you can't reject this child. With that, she covered her face and sobbed, her shoulders shaking, as if she had suffered an immense injustice. The banquet hall fell silent for a few seconds. A few distant relatives of the Gu family began whispering among themselves, their eyes darting between Tao Rulin and Lu Yi, as if weighing the direction of this farce. Then I laughed. My laughter wasn't loud, but it reached every ear clearly. I took the microphone back from the MC, tapped the head to make sure it was working, then leisurely walked down the stage and stopped in front of Louis. I was half a head taller than her. Looking down at her, she stepped back half a step, one hand clutching her belly, a flicker of guilt flashing across her face. But she quickly resumed her aggrieved expression. Miss Liu, you just said you're carrying the Gu family's bloodline. Yes, this is Mingxiu's child. I nodded, my expression earnest and gentle. Good, since you're so certain, I don't mind helping you get a verification done in front of everyone. With that, I took the second document from Xie Yinnan's hand. This file was blue, much thicker than the craft paper envelope from before. I slowly opened the seal, pulled out a neatly bound stack of reports, and held them up in front of Louis. Miss Liu, this is a paternity test report, the DNA comparison between the fetal amniotic fluid and Gu Mingxiu's DNA. The testing institution is the most authoritative forensic identification center in the capital. The report has an embossed seal, a serial number, and can be verified online at any time. Louise's face changed instantly, her pupils contracted sharply, her lips trembled, and she shrieked, "You're lying, I never had an amniocentesis. How could you possibly get the fetal DNA?" I tilted my head, smiling at her. "I know you never had an amniocentesis. The sample in this report wasn't taken from your belly either." I flipped the report to the last page, held it high, so everyone in the room could see the bold line in the conclusion column. I read it out word by word. According to the DNA test results, Gu Mingxiu is excluded from having a parent-child relationship with the sample. Then I flung the report at Louis's face, my voice turning cold. "Louis, the child in your belly is not Gu Mingxiu's at all." Chapter 4, The Bastard in the Belly. The color drained from Louise's face in an instant. She stumbled back 2 steps, her high heels catching on her own skirt hem, and she staggered, nearly falling, one hand braced against the table beside her, the other still cradling her lower abdomen, her knuckles turning an unnatural pale blue from the strain. She stared at the report in my hand, her lips trembling several times before she finally forced out a voice. "You're lying," Louis said. "This is fake. You forged it. I never had any paternity test done. How dare you frame me with a fake report?" I flipped the report to the first page and held it up in front of her eyes, letting her see the dense rows of test data and the red embossed seal of the Judicial Appraisal Center. My tone was unhurried, like I was explaining a simple math problem to a clueless child. "Miss Liu, as I just said, the sample for this report wasn't taken from you. Fetal DNA doesn't require amniocentesis to obtain. You're 16 weeks pregnant and had a non-invasive prenatal genetic test. They drew your own blood, and the fetal cell-free DNA was right there in your bloodstream. The testing facility keeps samples on file. As a legally interested party, the Gu family has the right to request a paternity comparison. All procedures are fully legal and compliant. Do you want to call the appraisal center yourself and verify?" Louise's lips went completely white. She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again, but no words came out. Her eyes began to dart around wildly, from my face to Xie Yinnan's, then to Tao Rulin's, as if searching for someone to speak up for her, but every face she found was cold as ice, and no one would meet her gaze. Gu Mingxiu stood 3 steps behind her, like a tree stump struck by lightning. His eyes were locked on Louis's belly, his Adam's apple bobbing several times, his voice hoarse as if scraped by sandpaper. Gu Mingxiu said, "Tell me, whose child is this?" Louis spun around and grabbed his arm, tears streaming down her face like broken pearls. Her voice was shrill and thin, carrying a sobbing, desperate edge. "Mingxiu, you have to believe me. The child is yours. It really is yours. Qinghe is setting me up. She's getting revenge because I took you from her. Everything she said is a lie." Gu Mingxiu didn't move. He looked down at her fingers gripping his arm, those pale, slender hands with light pink nail polish. Looking so fragile and harmless, he used to love her. Pitiful, helpless act, but now, looking at those hands, he only felt a chill run through him. He asked again, his voice hoarse, "I'm asking you, whose child is it?" His tone was heavier now, like the sky before a storm. Louis flinched at his voice, her crying cutting off abruptly, replaced by an uncontrollable trembling. Her lips moved several times before she finally squeezed out a sentence, "It's yours, Mingxiu, you have to believe me." I stood to the side, watching this scene, and couldn't help but let out a soft laugh. I flipped the report to the middle page, cleared my throat, and read the contents aloud. Gu Mingxiu, you don't need to pressure her anymore. This report clearly states that the child's real biological father has been identified through DNA comparison. Do you want to know who it is? Gu Mingxiu snapped his head up to look at me, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't speak, but his gaze already answered for him. I closed the report, lifted my head, and let my eyes drift past Louis and Gu Mingxiu, landing on a man in the corner of the guest seating. He was wearing an ill-fitting suit jacket, his tie crooked, and had been shrinking into the corner since earlier, as if trying to disappear into the wall. When he saw my gaze sweep over, he flinched like he'd been electrocuted, ducking his head low, his ears burning red. I raised my hand and pointed in that direction. "Miss Liu, you should be quite familiar with that gentleman, shouldn't you? His name is Zhao Ziyuan. Your college boyfriend of 4 years, and you never broke up after graduation either. The apartment you're living in now, the landlord's name is Zhao Ziyuan. Every time you told Gu Mingxiu you were going back to your hometown to visit your parents, you were actually going to Zhao Ziyuan's place. Do you need me to read out your hotel check-in records as well?" The entire hall erupted in uproar. All eyes swiveled sharply toward Zhao Ziyuan in the corner. That man shrank into his chair, wishing he could curl himself into a ball. His face was slick with cold sweat, glistening under the lights, looking both pathetic and ridiculous. Louis finally couldn't hold on anymore. Her legs gave way, and she collapsed onto the floor, tears smearing her makeup, mascara pooling into 2 dark stains under her eyes, making her look utterly disheveled. She grabbed Gu Mingxiu's leg, looking up at him, crying and begging, "Mingxiu, I was wrong. I was just confused for a moment, but I really do love you. Zhao Ziyuan kept pestering me. I had no choice but to." "You had no choice." Gu Mingxiu cut her off, his voice so cold it felt like it was pulled straight from an ice cellar. He looked down at the woman kneeling at his feet, his expression shifting from shock to disgust, from disgust to a twisted kind of self-mockery. He gritted his teeth, spitting out each word. "Louis, you told me you were carrying my child, and you made me take you to Switzerland to get married. You said if I just gave you a title, you wouldn't ask for anything else. You'd listen to everything I said. I believed you. For you, I pissed off Shinqinghe, I pissed off the Shin family, I pissed off my own mother, and I even lost my own inheritance rights. And now you're telling me the kid isn't mine." His voice grew louder and louder, until he was practically shouting by the end. He grabbed Louis by the collar, yanking her up from the ground, his eyes so red they looked like they were about to bleed. Louis was trembling from his scare, her cries sharp and piercing, her makeup completely ruined, making her look like a drenched chicken. "Mingxiu, let me explain. I really didn't mean to trick you. I was afraid you wouldn't marry me, so I..." Zhao Ziyuan, standing in the corner, finally couldn't take it anymore. He jumped up, shoving his chair aside to bolt for the door, but Xia Yinan's prearranged security guards grabbed him by the shoulders, pinning him in place. Zhao Ziyuan struggled a few times but couldn't break free, so he just hung his head, not daring to meet anyone's eyes, mumbling under his breath, "It's not my fault. She told me not to say anything. It was all her idea." The entire banquet hall erupted in chaos. Some people stood up to take photos, others whispered among themselves, and a few distant relatives of the Gu family got up and left in anger, throwing their napkins down as they went. Gu Mingxiu stood there, still gripping Louis's collar, but the expression on his face had shifted from rage to a complete blank. It was the kind of look that only appears when someone has been hit too hard, like their soul has been ripped out of their body. He slowly let go. Louis collapsed back onto the floor, covering her face and sobbing uncontrollably, but this time, no one stepped forward to help her up. Tao Roland set down her teacup, stood up, and smoothed the hem of her qipao. She walked to the center of the banquet hall, looking down at Louis sprawled on the floor, her expression like she was looking at a squashed cockroach. "Miss Liu, is there anything else you'd like to say?" Louis lifted her head, her face streaked with tears, looking at Tao Rulin, her lips trembling, wanting to say something but unable to get the words out. Tao Rulin nodded, as if making the decision for her, then she turned around, facing the entire banquet hall, and raised her voice a notch. Tao Rulin said, "Everyone has seen it. The fetus in Lu Yi's womb has nothing to do with the Gu family. Gu Mingxiu was deceived. And that's his own fault for not seeing clearly, but Lu Yi's use of fraud to trick her way into marriage. This matter, the Gu family will pursue to the fullest extent of the law." After saying this, she turned and looked at Gu Mingxiu. That look was complicated, carrying disappointment and heartache, but more than anything, a cold sense of frustration at his failure. "Gu Mingxiu, look at what you've become for a woman like this." Gu Mingxiu didn't say a word. He hung his head, his shoulders slumped, looking like he had aged 10 years. His eyes were red and raw, but he didn't shed a single tear. He just slowly turned around and walked step by step toward the banquet hall's entrance. His steps were so slow, as if each one drained every ounce of strength from his body. Lu Yi saw him leaving and scrambled to her feet, stumbling after him. She chased him, crying and shouting, "Mingxiu, don't go, let me explain, I really do love you." Gu Mingxiu didn't look back. He pushed open the banquet hall's doors, and his figure disappeared into the corridor. Lu Yi stood at the doorway, looking completely hollowed out. She turned around, her gaze sweeping viciously across the room, finally landing on me. Her eyes were full of hatred, her lips twisted, her voice hoarse as if it came straight from hell. "Shinchinghe, you ruined me. I'm not done with you." I glanced at her, my tone very calm. "Miss Lu, the one who ruined you isn't me, it's yourself." Then I turned around, linked my arm back through Xie Yannan's, and headed toward the stage. Xie Yannan glanced down at me, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Qinghe, when you read that report out loud just now, you were stunning." I curved the corners of my mouth and whispered back to him, "That's nothing, there's even more impressive stuff coming." Chapter 5, The Shin Family's Reckoning ****. After Lu Yi was escorted out by the security guards, the banquet hall fell silent for about 10 seconds. That silence was subtle, not an awkward lull, but a hush where everyone was digesting what had just happened. Then, from the Shin family's head table, came the crisp sound of a wine glass being tapped. Doke, 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 steady, unhurried, like some kind of signal. I turned my head and saw my father, Shinjinshan, stand up. Shinjinshan was 56 years old, half of his hair already white, but his back was straighter than any young man's. He wore a dark gray custom-tailored suit, his tie perfectly knotted. Standing there like a silent mountain, he rarely lost his temper and never made public statements lightly, but everyone knew that once Shinjinshan opened his mouth, every word carried weight. He raised his glass, toasted the entire room, then let his gaze fall on me, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. That smile was faint, but I knew it was my father's most serious expression. Shinjinshan said, "Today is the joyous day of my daughter Shinqinghe and my son-in-law Xie Yannan. I am deeply grateful to all the esteemed guests for gracing us with your presence." He paused there, then set down his glass, his expression darkening. Shinjinshan said, "But before we drink this toast, there's something I need to make clear in front of everyone. In all my years of doing business, I, Shinjinshan, have always valued one thing above all, trust. When I said I would form an alliance with the Gu family, the Shin family showed full sincerity, capital injection, projects, channels, not a single thing lacking. And how did the Gu family repay me?" His voice wasn't loud, but it was heavy as a hammer, pounding into everyone's ears. Shinjinshan said, "Gu Mingxiu, while my daughter was still under a marital agreement, took another woman abroad to get married. To this day, the Gu family has not given the Shin family a formal explanation for this matter, since the matriarch of the Gu family is present today. I'll lay it all out on the table." He turned and nodded slightly in Tao Rulin's direction. Tao Rulin also stood up, and the two of them exchanged a look under the gaze of the crowd, as if conducting some silent handover. Shinjinshan said, "From today onward, the Shin Group will completely withdraw all capital injections to the Gu Corporation. As for the 3 plots of land south of the city owned by the Gu Corporation, 2 of them have pledges from the Shin Group. I am formally notifying everyone here today that the Shin Group will initiate auction proceedings for public bidding. If anyone present is interested, you are welcome to participate." The moment those words were spoken, the entire hall erupted. Everyone in the business circle knew that the Gu Corporation had been stretching itself too thin over the past 2 years, with a tight cash flow that relied entirely on the Shin Group's capital injections. Those 3 plots of land south of the city were the Gu Corporation's core assets. Once they were auctioned off, Half of the Gu Corporation's foundation would collapse. Shinjinshan's strike was both precise and ruthless. The relatives at the Gu family's tables all stood up, some with ashen faces, some panicked, and others pulling out their phones to make calls, their voices low but urgent. Gu Mingxian sat in her seat, her chopsticks falling onto the table with a crisp clatter. She froze for 2 seconds, then abruptly stood up and walked over to Tao Rulin, whispering something. Tao Rulin raised her hand to press down on Gu Mingxuan's arm, signaling her to sit. Then she turned around, faced Shinjinshan, and gave a slight bow. Tao Rulin said, "Brother Shin, this matter is the Gu family's fault toward Qinghe and toward the Shin family. The Gu family accepts this debt. As for the auction, the Gu family has no objections." Her tone was calm as she spoke, her expression unchanged, but her fingers gripping the teacup tightened slightly. I knew her heart was bleeding inside. Those 3 plots south of the city were negotiated one by one when Gu Yuanshan was still alive. They were the Gu family's lifeline. Tao Rulin, as the head of the family, gritted her teeth and handed over that lifeline in front of the entire city's elite. Shinjinshan looked at her and nodded slightly. He picked up his glass from the table again, raised it toward Tao Rulin, and downed it in one gulp. That glass of wine was enough to give Tao Rulin face, and it also served as a message to everyone present. The grudges between the Shin and Gu families ended here. From now on, bridges were bridges, and roads were roads, but I knew it wasn't over yet. Sure enough, after setting down his glass, Shinjinshan reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He unfolded it. It was a document. He placed the document on the table and tapped it lightly twice with his finger. Shinjinshan said there was one more thing. At the end of last year, the Gu family had signed a gambling agreement with the Shin family, with the 3-year revenue of a subsidiary under the Gu family as the target. Now that Gu Mingxiu had done something like this, the Shin family decided to terminate the agreement early. According to the terms, the Gu family needed to pay the Shin family a penalty within 30 working days, and the amount was, he glanced down at the number on the document, then looked up and reported it in a flat tone, 730 million. The entire venue fell silent again. 730 million. That number meant nothing to the Gu family at their peak, but to the Gu family now, it was almost fatal. Capital withdrawal, asset auctions, penalty recovery, 3 knives striking at once, and the Gu family's cash flow would snap in the shortest time. Everyone in the know mentally calculated the numbers and reached the same conclusion. The Gu family was about to take a massive fall this time. Tao Rulin's expression finally shifted. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, then opened them again, her voice steady as if nothing had happened. Tao Rulin said, "Brother Shin, 730 million, the Gu family won't be a single cent short, and it'll be in your account within 30 days. Shinjinshan nodded, folded the document, and put it back in his pocket. Then he picked up his wine glass, turned, and walked over to Xie Yinnan's parents, his expression shifting from stern to warm. He clinked glasses with Xie's father and said with a smile, "In-laws, let's have a drink." The kids pulled off a beautiful ceremony. "And as a father, I'm happy." Xie's father stood up, holding Shinjinshan's hand with both of his eyes slightly red. "Brother Shin, rest assured, if that boy Yannan dares to treat Qinghe badly, I'll be the first to object." The 2 old men clinked glasses and downed their drinks in one go. Shinjinshan set down his glass, turned his head, and glanced at me. There wasn't much in that look, just the kind of tenderness a father has for his daughter. I curved the corner of my mouth at him as a response, then I shifted my gaze to the corner of the banquet hall. Gu Mingxiu had somehow come back. He stood by the side door, half his body hidden behind the doorframe, like he wanted to come in but didn't dare. His suit jacket was gone somewhere, the collar of his white shirt unbuttoned 2 buttons, his hair a mess, making him look like he just crawled out of a dumpster. His eyes were fixed straight on the main table, on his mother Tao Rulin's unflinching face, on the wine glass and Shinshan's hand, on Xie Yinnan's hand resting on my shoulder. His expression was complicated. There was anger, resentment, regret, but mostly fear, because he finally realized that he hadn't just lost me, hadn't just lost the Shin family's support, he had lost the entire foundation he stood on in this city. Lu Yi had somehow appeared again. She came around from behind Gu Mingxiu, reaching out to grab his arm, but he shook her off. Her face was as pale as paper, her eyes swollen and red, her hair disheveled over her shoulders, looking nothing like the cute, charming girl she had been at the start. She bit her lip and whispered something to Gu Mingxiu. Gu Mingxiu whipped his head around, staring at her like she was a stranger. Then he laughed. The laugh wasn't loud, but it sent chills down everyone's spine. "Are you satisfied now, Lu Yi? are you satisfied now? Louis took a step back from his laugh, her lips trembling. Unable to speak, Gu Mingxiu didn't bother with her anymore. Instead, he turned and walked toward me. Step by step, Xia Yannan stepped forward, blocking me. His hands hung naturally at his sides, but his shoulders tensed slightly, like a leopard ready to pounce. He looked at Gu Mingxiu and said in a very light tone, "Mingxiu, you should leave now." Gu Mingxiu stopped. He stood 3 steps away from me, looking up at me, his eyes red as if they were about to crack. His lips moved several times before he finally squeezed out a sentence. "Qinghe, can I talk to you for a moment?" Just a few words. Xia Yannan was about to refuse when I reached out and gently patted his arm. He glanced at me sideways, and I told him with my eyes that it was okay. He was silent for 2 seconds, then stepped aside. I looked at Gu Mingxiu, my expression calm. "What do you want to say?" Gu Mingxiu took a deep breath, his Adam's apple bobbing several times. His voice was hoarse, like it had been smoked. "Qinghe, I'm sorry. I know nothing I say matters now, but I still want to say I'm sorry." I nodded, my voice very soft. "Okay, I heard you." Then I turned around, took Xia Yannan's arm again, and walked back toward the main table without looking back. Gu Mingxiu shouted after me, his voice almost a roar, "Qinghe, I really know I was wrong. Give me one chance, just one." I didn't look back. Xia Yannan turned his head to glance at me, his voice low as he murmured, "He really seemed to regret it. That's his problem." Xia Yannan didn't say anything else, just tightened his grip on my hand. His hand was warm, steadily wrapping around my fingers, as if telling me that from now on, there was nothing to fear. And at that moment, standing in the corner, Louis was staring at my back with a deathly glare. Her eyes burned with a hatred so fierce it bordered on madness, and the corners of her mouth slowly curled up into a twisted smile. One hand pressed against her lower abdomen, the other pulled out her phone from her handbag and dialed a number. After the call connected, she only said 2 sentences. The first was, "Is the stuff ready?" The second was, "Good, then send it up." During the toast, she hung up, shoved the phone back into her handbag, smoothed her hair and dress, and plastered back on that pitiful, innocent expression. She took a deep breath, straightened her back, and headed toward another direction in the banquet hall. Over there was the wedding dessert table, where a few staff from the wedding planning company were setting up the champagne tower. Preparing for the upcoming toast segment, Louis walked over to the dessert table and whispered a few words to a server in a black vest. The server nodded, pulled out a tray covered with red silk cloth from under the cart, and handed it to her. Louis took the tray, lifted a corner of the red silk cloth, and peeked inside. Then she covered it back up, the corners of her mouth curving into an icy arc. "Qinghe, you think you've won. The real show is just beginning." Chapter 6. Brothers at odds. When the toast segment began, the atmosphere in the banquet hall had already returned to its lively buzz. The band switched to a light-hearted tune, guests clinked glasses and wandered between tables, laughter and the sound of toasts rising and falling, as if the earlier face-off had never happened. That's how high society social scenes work. Even if the sky falls, the champagne keeps flowing, the pleasantries keep coming, and whoever loses composure first loses the game. Xia Yannan and I were holding our glasses, about to head to the third table, when a sudden commotion erupted near the dessert table. A few servers were huddled together in a fluster, someone whispering urgently in a low, strained voice. I followed the sound and noticed that the champagne tower by the dessert table had been tampered with. The top few glasses were tilted precariously, as if they might fall at any moment. A server in a black vest was bent over, picking up shards of glass on the floor. Flustered, his expression far too panicked, I couldn't help but give him a second look. Something about his movements felt off. As he picked up the glass pieces, he kept glancing around, as if waiting for some signal. Xia Yannan noticed too. He narrowed his eyes slightly, leaned over, and whispered in my ear, "Qinghe, that server, I've never seen him before. He's not part of our wedding team." I nodded, about to say something, when my peripheral vision caught another scene. Louis had somehow moved again. She circled around from the dessert table, holding an elegant silver tray with an already opened bottle of red wine and 2 crystal goblets. Her hair had been rearranged, her makeup touched up, and though her eyes were still a bit red and swollen, her overall demeanor had shifted from the earlier disarray to a forced composure. She carried the tray through the crowd, heading straight towards Xia Yannan and me, a smile hanging on her lips. I knew that smile well. It was the kind of smile someone wears when they have a trump card. She stopped in front of us held the tray forward and spoke in a voice loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. Louis said, "Miss Shin, Mr. Xia, I wish you a lifetime of happiness. This glass of wine is my toast to you." The guests at the nearby tables all paused, their gazes snapping over. A few people had their chopsticks frozen midair, mouths slightly open, as if watching an uninvited bonus scene. After all, they had just been tearing into each other, and now she was showing up with a different face too. Toast, anyone would find it suspicious. Xia Yannan didn't reach for the glass. He looked down at the wine bottle on the tray, his gaze pausing at the bottle's mouth for a moment, then lifted his head to look at Louis, his tone flat. "Miss Liu, weren't you just escorted out? How did you get back in?" Louis's expression froze for less than half a second before snapping back to normal. "Mr. Xia, I just wanted to offer a toast. To express my blessings, no matter what happened before, today is your big day, and I feel the formalities of etiquette should still be observed. Miss Shin, you wouldn't refuse to drink a single glass, would you?" She finished speaking and pushed the tray forward again. The red wine in the two goblets shimmered with a dark crimson luster under the light, looking no different from ordinary wine. I was about to speak when a figure suddenly rushed over from the side. It was Gu Mingxiu. He had appeared out of nowhere, his hair messier than before, his eyes red as if they were about to bleed, his entire face twisted almost beyond recognition. He grabbed Louis's wrist and shoved the tray in her hand away. The tray tipped over, the bottle and glasses shattering on the floor, red wine splashing everywhere, spreading a pool of dark crimson liquid across the white tiles, a sight that was both jarring and chilling. Gu Mingxiu's voice was hoarse, nearly a roar. "Enough, Louis, what else do you want?" Louis was yanked sideways by him, but her expression was eerily calm. She glanced down at the broken bottle on the floor, then looked up at Gu Mingxiu, tears springing to her eyes on cue, her voice dripping with the grievance of someone wronged. "Mingxiu, I just wanted to offer a toast. What did I do wrong? Why are you treating me like this?" Gu Mingxiu stared at her, his chest heaving more and more violently, his lips trembled, and his voice squeezed through gritted teeth. "Shut up, Louis. Ever since you showed up, you've ruined my life. I destroyed the engagement, I destroyed my mother's trust in me, I destroyed the Gu family's reputation, I've blocked every path I had. Do you know what I was thinking when I stood at the door just now? I was thinking, what the hell am I even doing this for?" Louis's tears flowed even harder. She reached out to grab Gu Mingxiu's arm, but he shoved her hand away. Gu Mingxiu turned, his gaze shifting from Louis to Xia Yannan. His eyes changed. That look held anger, jealousy, but most of all, a near mad hatred. He stared at Xia Yannan, his chin slightly lifted, as if trying to cling to the last shred of his dignity. Gu Mingxiu said, "Xia Yannan, you just said you only met Qinghe after she called off the engagement. Say it again, in front of everyone. When did you really meet her? Do you dare to say it?" Xia Yannan glanced at him but said nothing. Gu Mingxiu's voice suddenly shot up, as if unleashing all the pent-up emotion from the entire night. He roared, "Say it. Do you dare?" The banquet hall fell silent again. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Xia Yannan. A few of the Xia family elders stood up, their faces dark. Xia Yannan's mother, Zhou Min, leaned out from the main table, frowning, about to speak, but Xia's father pressed her hand, signaling her to stay quiet. Xia Yannan was silent for a few seconds, then looked up, meeting Gu Mingxiu's gaze, his tone as calm as if he were narrating something unrelated to himself. "I met Qinghe earlier than you think. Gu Mingxiu, do you remember the engagement banquet a year ago?" Gu Mingxiu froze. Xia Yannan continued, "That day, you were 40 minutes late. Qinghe stood alone at the entrance, waiting for you for 40 minutes. The wind was strong that day, and she was in her gown, her lips turning purple from the cold. I was the first guest to arrive. I watched her stand there waiting for you, with no one by her side. I said a couple of words to her, but she didn't say anything, just smiled at me and said, 'It's fine, Mingxiu should be here soon.'" As Xia Yannan spoke, a subtle shift crept into his tone, not anger, but a restrained coldness. "Then you finally showed up. Who did you bring with you? Do you remember? You brought Louis. You said she was your friend, just happened to be on the way. After the engagement banquet, you even made Qinghe take a cab home by herself because you were taking Louis back." That night, Qinghe sat alone on the steps outside the hotel, waiting for the Shin family's car to pick her up. I was the one who draped my jacket over her. And I was the one who saw her into the car. Gu Mingxiu's face went completely pale. Xia Yannan took a step forward, the distance between them now close enough that their shoulders could almost touch. Xia Yannan was half a head taller than Gu Mingxiu, looking down at him slightly, his tone unhurried. Gu Mingxiu, from that day on, I decided that if you wouldn't cherish her yourself, don't blame someone else for stepping in. You ask me when I started messing around with your woman, I'll tell you, I got together with Qinghe after she called off the engagement. Every step was above board, every meeting had a traceable trail. What did you do? You flew to Switzerland behind her back and secretly got married, treating her like a fool. Do you have any right to question me here? Gu Mingxiu's breathing grew heavy and ragged. He suddenly swung his fist, aiming it straight at Xia Yannan's face. This punch came fast and hard. Lu Yi let out a shriek, and the surrounding guests scrambled backward. A middle-aged woman in a gown tripped over a chair, nearly falling, but Xia Yannan reacted faster than Gu Mingxiu. He sidestepped, and Gu Mingxiu's fist grazed past his ear, slicing through empty air. The momentum sent Gu Mingxiu stumbling forward a step. Before he could steady himself, Xia Yannan had already reached out, grabbed his wrist, and twisted it back. Gu Mingxiu grunted, his entire body forced into a half-bend, his right arm pinned behind him, immobilized. Xia Yannan's grip was precise, tight enough to keep him from breaking free, but not enough to truly hurt him. He looked down at Gu Mingxiu's flushed face, his voice low, meant only for the two of them. Gu Mingxiu, today is my wedding with Qinghe. I don't want her to see a fight, but if you keep this up, I won't mind finding another way to talk to you. With that, he let go. Gu Mingxiu stumbled back 2 steps, steadying himself against a nearby table. A red mark had been pressed into his wrist, but he seemed completely oblivious to the pain. He just stood there, dazed, his gaze cutting through the crowd and landing on me. His eyes were red, his lips white, his whole face drained of all color. He opened his mouth, his voice so hoarse it was barely audible. Qinghe, tell me he's lying. Did you start from back then? I stepped forward a few paces, stood beside Xia Yannan, and naturally looped my arm through his. I looked at Gu Mingxiu, my tone calm. Gu Mingxiu, Yannan told the truth. That day at the engagement banquet, I stood at the door waiting for you for 40 minutes. Later, you left with Lu Yi. I sat alone on the steps, and Yannan took off his jacket and draped it over me. What he didn't let me know was that there was a pack of tissues stuffed in his jacket pocket, because he was afraid I might cry. I paused, then said, but I didn't cry, because from that night on, I knew you, Gu Mingxiu, aren't worth a single tear from me. Gu Mingxiu's shoulders sagged, he lowered his head, his whole body seeming shattered by that answer. His hands were trembling, his entire frame shaking, like a machine drained of fuel, its parts scattering one by one across the floor. The banquet hall fell silent for a few seconds, then Shen Jinshan's voice broke through the quiet. Enough, today is Qinghe and Yannan's wedding. Anyone who wants to cause trouble is disrespecting the Shen family. His tone wasn't loud, but every word carried the weight of 1,000 pounds. A few of the younger Shen family members had already stood up, their gazes fixed on Gu Mingxiu with clear hostility. Over at the Xia family's side, a few people were murmuring among themselves, their looks toward Gu Mingxiu shifting from initial politeness to outright coldness. Tao Rulan set down her teacup, stood up, and walked over to Gu Mingxiu. She raised her hand and used her fingertips to straighten his crooked collar. Her movements were gentle, like she was tending to a wounded child, but the words that came out of her mouth held no warmth. Mingxiu, come with me, you've lost enough face tonight. Gu Mingxiu didn't resist, he kept his head down, as if all his strength had drained away, letting Tao Rulan pull him by the arm toward the banquet hall's entrance. As they passed Lu Yi, Tao Rulan's steps faltered for a moment, her gaze swept over Lu Yi's face, and that look was cold to the bone. Miss Lu, your performance tonight is about done. Then she walked out without looking back. When Gu Mingxiu reached the door with Tao Rulan, he suddenly stopped. He didn't turn around, just faced away from everyone, his voice hoarse as he said one thing, Qinghe, I'm sorry. Then he pushed open the door and stepped out into the night. Lu Yi stood there, her expression shifting from aggrieved to dark, from dark to a kind of indescribable viciousness. She glanced down at the shattered wine bottle and the red wine spilled across the floor, the corner of her mouth twitching. Then she turned and hurried toward the side door. I watched her retreating figure for a moment, then turned to Xia Yannan and said, Yannan, have the wine from that bottle sampled and sent for testing? Xia Yannan nodded. already being handled. We exchanged a look, then he tightened his grip on my hand and led me toward the next table of guests. The music started up again, laughter and the clinking of glasses filling the banquet hall once more, but I knew the eyes hidden in the shadows were still watching us. And Louis's final cards clearly hadn't all been played yet. Chapter 7. Louis's last card. Louis slipped out through the side door, and the banquet hall seemed to regain its calm on the surface. The band switched to a lighter tune, and the guests continued clinking glasses and mingling, but I noticed Xianyannan's gaze never left the direction of that side door. He leaned slightly toward me, his voice low in my ear. "I've got someone tailing her, don't worry." I nodded, took a small sip from my glass, and swept my eyes across the room. Xinjinshan was clinking glasses with Xianyannan's father, Xiaoshongyuan. The two old men were flushed with drink, their laughter carrying across several tables. Tao Roland had returned after seeing off Gu Mingxiu, sitting alone at the table next to the main one, her expression blank, as if waiting for something. In front of her sat a cup of tea that had long gone cold, but she didn't drink it, just traced the rim with her finger, her gaze occasionally flickering toward the door. I knew what she was waiting for. She was waiting for Louis's next move. About 20 minutes later, as the toasting segment was winding down, the banquet hall's main doors suddenly burst open from the outside. The push was forceful, both doors swinging wide and slamming against the walls with two dull thuds. Every head turned toward the entrance. Standing in the doorway was Louis, but this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her trailed a young man in a dark blue uniform, a work badge pinned to his chest, carrying a briefcase. He looked like some kind of institutional staffer. Two men with cameras followed, one shouldering a rig, the other holding a microphone. The logo on the mic was unmistakable to me. It was from the city's highest-rated entertainment news channel. The hall fell silent again. A few guests recognized the TV station's logo and gasped, hands flying to their mouths. Xinjinshan set down his glass, his brow furrowing into a deep crease. Xiaoshongyuan also stood up, his face darkening. Louis stood at the door, her tear-streaked face now wiped clean, replaced by a meticulously reapplied makeup. Her lipstick was a shade darker than before, like a smear of blood. A smile curled at the corners of her mouth, the kind of smile only someone who's burned all their bridges would wear. She walked in on her high heels, the taps echoing crisp and sharp against the marble floor. She stopped at the center of the banquet hall, turned to face the crowd, and spoke in a voice clear and loud. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sorry to interrupt your enjoyment, but today, I'm going to expose the truth behind this wedding, right here in front of everyone." As she said this, her gaze locked directly onto me, the smile in her eyes deepening. "Xinqinghe, you think you've won, don't you? You think marrying Xiayannan means you can trample me underfoot. Let me tell you, you're wrong. I have something in my hands. Once I reveal it, this marriage between you and Xiayannan will be nothing but a complete joke." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. A few guests who loved a good show set down their chopsticks, leaned back in their chairs, cups in hand, ready for the drama. Several younger members of the Shen family stood up to block Louis, but Xinjinshan stopped them with a single look. His expression was heavy, but he didn't move. He was waiting for Louis to show her hand, because he knew that only when an opponent lays all their cards on the table can you settle everything in one go. Xianyannan's hand tightened slightly around mine. I turned to glance at him. His face was calm, but a thin layer of cold light glimmered in his eyes. He whispered, "Qinghe, no matter what she pulls out, I'm here." I curved the corner of my mouth, my voice light. "I know." Then I stepped forward 2 paces, facing Louis, my voice pitched just right for everyone to hear. "Miss Liu, you've already put on quite a few shows tonight. The fake pregnancy was exposed. The fake feelings were exposed. And now you've brought reporters. Go ahead, what else have you got? Lay it all out at once." Louis let out a cold laugh. She took the briefcase from the man in uniform, opened it, and pulled out a stack of documents, waving them around the room. "Xinqinghe, you keep accusing me of lying, but what about you? Do you think you're so clean? Did you marry Xiayannan out of love, or was it because—" She paused, her gaze flickering over Xianyannan's face before landing back on me, her voice rising sharply. "Or was it because you can't have kids, so you were desperate to find someone to take the fall?" This sentence hit like a bomb, exploding through the banquet hall. All eyes snapped onto me in an instant. Someone gasped, someone let out a low cry, and a few of the Shen family elders changed color, slamming the table as they stood up. The wine glass in Xinjinshan's hand cracked under his grip, liquid splashing out onto the tablecloth. Louis was very satisfied with the effect. She unfolded the document in her hand, raised it above her head, and shouted to the entire hall, this is Xinqinghe's medical checkup report from the Central Hospital, dated 6 months ago. It's written clearly in black and white. Her conclusion includes one item: congenital fallopian tube dysplasia, extremely low probability of natural conception. Does anyone want to take a look? She flipped the report over, turning the page with text toward the guests, then unhurriedly walked to the nearest table and slapped the report down on it. That table was occupied by a few distant relatives of the Xia family. A middle-aged woman in a rose-red suit leaned in for a glance, and her face instantly changed. She looked up at me, then at Xia Yannan, her lips twitching a few times without a word. Louis turned around, facing the entire hall again, her voice carrying a barely suppressed smugness. Take a good look, everyone. When Xinqinghe married Gu Mingxiu, she hid this medical report tight, not a single word to the Gu family. Now she's married Xia Yannan. Does the Xia family know about this? Does Xia Yannan know? He's married a woman who can't give him an heir. Xinqinghe, do you dare, in front of everyone, to say this report is fake? The entire hall fell into dead silence. All eyes darted back and forth between me and Xia Yannan, the air seeming to freeze. Xia Yannan's parents sat at the main table, their faces drained of color. Xia Zhongyuan's brows were tightly knit. Zhou Min covered her mouth, her eyes slightly reddening, but she didn't cry, she just stared at me, as if waiting for an answer. And standing in the center of the crowd, Louis' smile grew wider. She knew she had played the right card. In her view, the most important thing in a wealthy family was offspring. A woman who couldn't bear children, no matter how good her family background, no one would want to marry her. She thought that once this report came out, the Xia family would flip out on the spot. Xia Yannan would hesitate, and this wedding would become a huge joke. But what she didn't know was that I had already shown this report to Xia Yannan 3 months ago. I stood still, not moving. My expression never changed from start to finish, and I even had a faint smile on my lips. I glanced at Louis, then at the report on the table, and tilted my head slightly, my tone as casual as if I were talking about the weather. Miss Liu, is that all? Louis' smile froze for a moment. She clearly hadn't expected this reaction from me. She thought I would panic, thought I would cry and deny it, thought Xia Yannan would be shocked and question me, but I didn't. I just stood there, like I was watching a clown's pathetic performance. She took another step forward, her voice growing sharper. Xinqinghe, what are you pretending to be calm for? Don't you just rely on your looks and your family's money? Do you think that can cover up the fact that you can't have kids? Xia Yannan, do you even know what kind of woman you married? Even Gu Mingxiu didn't want her. Why did she pick you? Because she's guilty. She knew the Gu family would never accept a daughter-in-law who can't bear children, so she rushed to break off the engagement and jumped into marrying you. She got more and more worked up, her voice echoing through the banquet hall, piercing enough to make eardrums ache. The reporters behind her pushed forward with their cameras, lenses aimed directly at me and Xia Yannan's faces, capturing every detail. Then Xia Yannan moved. He stepped forward, placing himself between me and Louis. He didn't look at the report, didn't look at the camera lenses, just stared down at Louis, his face as blank as if he were looking at air. Miss Liu, are you done? Louis choked on his reaction, but quickly regained her smug expression. Xia Yannan, I know this is hard for you to accept, but the truth is, Xinqinghe can't have kids. She lied to you, just like she lied to Gu Mingxiu. Xia Yannan let out a soft laugh. That laugh was short and light, but in the deathly quiet hall where you could hear a pin drop, everyone heard it clearly. He turned and walked to the table, picked up the report, glanced at it, then held it up, facing the entire hall. This report is real. Another wave of commotion swept through the hall. Xia Yannan's mother, Zhou Min, finally couldn't hold it in and stood up, shouting, Yannan, what are you saying? Xia Yannan turned his head to glance at his mother, gave a slight nod, and spoke in a calm, steady tone. Mom, I said, this report is real. Xinqinghe is indeed different from ordinary women. Her chances of natural conception are lower than average. But, he paused, set the report down on the table, then turned and walked over to me. Taking my hand, he looked at everyone in the room, his voice unhurried, as if he had prepared this speech long ago. But I married Xinqinghe, not to have her bear my children. I married her because she is the best woman I have ever met in my life. Gu Mingxiu didn't cherish her. I do. Gu Mingxiu left her alone at the engagement party. I draped a coat over her. Gu Mingxiu secretly got a marriage certificate with someone else. I pursued her openly and honestly. Gu Mingxiu saw her as a tool. I see her as a treasure. He paused, his voice steadying even more. As for the matter of children, Chinghe and I had thorough communication before our marriage, we have our own plans, and we don't owe anyone an explanation. Miss Liu, you went to great lengths to steal a medical report, hoping to use it to destroy our wedding, but you forgot one thing. He looked down at Liu Yi, his eyes turning cold. True feelings aren't sustained by having children. Gu Mingxiu might not understand that, but Xia Yannan, do. The moment he finished, the entire venue fell silent for 3 seconds, then Shen Jinshan was the first to clap. His applause was loud and crisp, like hammering iron. Right after, everyone at the Shen family's main table stood up, and a wave of applause erupted, filling the room. Xia Shongyuan rose to his feet, glanced at his son, then at me, hesitated for 2 seconds, and finally joined in the applause. Loui's face completely changed. She took a step back, her lips trembling, her eyes darting frantically around the room, only to find that everyone's gaze was filled with contempt. The fatal blow she thought she had delivered was deflected with effortless grace. She thought she had the winning card, not knowing that I had already shown that card to Xia Yannan. 3 months ago, that day, after Xia Yannan finished reading the report, he said only one thing to me, Chinghe, I don't care if you can have children or not, what I care about is whether you're willing to let me take care of you for the rest of your life. I've remembered it ever since now, watching Louis's expression shift from smugness to panic, from panic to despair. I picked up a glass of champagne from the table and walked slowly over to her. Miss Liu, do you have anything else to show? If so, bring it all out at once. If not, I raised the champagne glass to her and gave a faint smile. Then I won't see you out. Chapter 8. Louise passed. Louise stood frozen in place, her face as if someone had hit the pause button, the documents in her hand scattered across the floor. The man in uniform had slipped away unnoticed, leaving only the 2 reporters exchanging glances. The one with the camera lowered his equipment, the station logo on the microphone glaring under the lights. I held my champagne glass, unhurriedly walking up to her. My gaze swept over her face, then shifted to the 2 reporters. You 2 are from Orange Entertainment, right? Since you're here, you might as well keep filming. What comes next is even more interesting than what just happened. The 2 reporters exchanged a look. The one with the camera hesitated for 2 seconds, then hoisted the gear back onto his shoulder. They had been called here by Louis tonight, but reporters only follow the buzz, not the person. Whoever delivers the juiciest story gets their lens. Louis jerked her head up, her voice sharp. Chinghe, what else do you want? You've already won. You've ruined me. You've ruined Mingxiu. Isn't that enough? I tilted my head, looking at her, my tone light. Miss Liu, you're wrong. You got exposed for faking a pregnancy because you lied. Gu Mingxiu lost his inheritance because he betrayed our engagement. These are things you did yourselves. What does it have to do with me? I just told the truth. I set the champagne glass down on a nearby table and took another step closer. Now less than an arm's length away, but you reminded me of something. In what you said earlier, there was one line I found particularly interesting. You said I rely on being good-looking and having a rich family. Miss Liu, have you ever thought about what you've relied on to get where you are today? Louis's lips quivered, but she said nothing. I smiled, turned to face the entire room of guests, and raised my voice slightly. Everyone, Miss Louis just showed you my medical report, trying to prove I can't have children. Now, it's my turn to show you all Miss Liu's resume. I took a deep red folder from Xia Yannan's hands and opened it to find a thick stack of documents inside. I pulled out the first page. It was a photocopy of an old photograph. In the photo, a middle-aged woman in an apron stood at the entrance of an old-fashioned villa, holding a baby in her arms. The photo had yellowed with age, but the woman's facial features bore a striking resemblance to Louis, about 70% similar. I held the photo up, facing the entire room. This woman is named Lu Meifang. 30 years ago, she worked as a live-in nanny for the Gu family. The baby in her arms is me. The room fell silent again. A few of the Gu family's old servants, sitting in the back corner, all changed expressions when they saw the photo. One elderly woman with graying hair stood up, squinted to get a better look, then gasped, covering her mouth. Oh my God, it's Sister Lu. I continued. Lu Meifang worked for the Gu family for 6 years, primarily responsible for taking care of the Gu family's young madam at the time, Madame Tao Rulin, Gu Mingxiu's mother. But in the year I was born, Lu Meifang was fired by the Gu family for theft. I flipped to the second page, which was a photocopy of a yellowed police report. It clearly stated that in March 1994, the Gu family reported the loss of several valuable items from their home, and an investigation found that the nanny, Lu Meifang, was responsible, however, because the stolen items were of significant value and involved the Shin family. The Shin family chose not to press charges at the time, and Liu Meifang was simply dismissed. I held up the police report as well, making sure everyone could see the text. Then I turned my head to look at Liu Yi. Miss Liu Meifang is your mother, isn't she? Liu Yi's face had gone completely pale. She took a step back, her lips trembling, her voice squeezing out through clenched teeth. You're lying, I don't know any Liu Meifang. I smiled, then pulled out the third page from the folder. It was a photocopy of a household registration record, clearly documenting the mother-daughter relationship between Liu Yi and Liu Meifang. I held this document up too, flipping to the page with the photo. In it, Liu Yi looked about 15 or 16, standing next to a woman who was unmistakably Liu Meifang from the earlier photo. Do I need to pull up your original household registration records too? Liu Yi's lips had lost all color. She stared at me, her eyes filled with pure terror, her whole body frozen in place as if nailed to the spot. The guests in the banquet hall erupted in a muffled murmur of discussion, all eyes fixed on Liu Yi. Those gazes carried contempt, surprise, and more than anything, a dawning realization. A nanny's daughter had infiltrated a wealthy family's wedding banquet and nearly destroyed the alliance between the Shin and Gu families. This was more absurd than a TV drama, but I wasn't done yet. I flipped to the fourth page. It was a color photo of a jade bracelet, vivid green, excellent water quality, clearly an antique with years of history. I held the photo up, facing the main table, and gave a slight bow toward Tao Rulin. Auntie Gu, you should recognize this bracelet, right? Tao Rulin stood up from her seat. She stared at the photo, and for the first time, her expression shifted. She took a deep breath, her voice trembling slightly. This bracelet was my mother's dowry to me. It was among the items lost 30 years ago. I thought I'd never see it again. I nodded, then turned to face Liu Yi. Miss Liu, this bracelet is currently in the safe in the apartment you're renting. Your mother, Liu Meifang, stole it from the Gu family 30 years ago. 30 years later, you took it to a pawn shop for an appraisal, planning to sell it. I've already pulled the pawn shop's records. Do you want me to read them out loud? Liu Yi looked as if she'd been struck by lightning. She stumbled back 2 steps, knocking over a chair behind her. Her lips quivered violently, the last trace of color draining from her face, making her look like a cornered rat. Her mouth opened and closed several times before she finally squeezed out a sentence. That was left to me by my mom. What right do you have to investigate me? I laughed. I turned to face the entire room, my tone shifting from calm to a cold, biting sarcasm. Did everyone hear that? She admitted it. Her mother, Liu Meifang, worked as a nanny for the Gu family 30 years ago, stole their belongings, including Madame Tao Rulin's dowry jade bracelet. 30 years later, Liu Meifang's daughter, Liu Yi, barges into the Gu family, into this wedding, playing the victim, claiming she's innocent. I turned my head, my gaze landing back on Liu Yi. Miss Liu, was it really just a coincidence that you got close to Gu Mingxiu? Was that accidental meeting at the cafe really an accident? You knew who he was from the very beginning, and you were after the Gu family from the start. Your mother stole from the Gu family, and 30 years later, you come to steal their fortune. You two really do carry on the family tradition. Those words stabbed into Liu Yi's heart like a knife. She collapsed onto the ground, tears streaming uncontrollably down her face, but this time, no one felt sorry for her. The guests around her stepped back, as if avoiding something filthy. An elder from the Gu family stood up, pointed at Liu Yi, and cursed, "Shameless bitch." The reporters nearby were already buzzing with excitement. The cameraman aimed his lens at Liu Yi, who was slumped on the floor, holding the shot steady. The one holding the microphone spoke rapidly into it, his tone as thrilled as if he'd won the lottery. Footage like this from tonight would be enough to fuel their headlines for an entire week. Liu Yi sat on the ground and suddenly started laughing. Her laughter was sharp and fragmented, like shards of glass scraping against an iron plate, sending chills down everyone's spine. She laughed as she lifted her head, her makeup completely ruined, mascara and eyeliner mixed with tears streaked down her face, leaving 2 dark, messy trails. Her eyes were bloodshot, as if they might bleed, and her voice was hoarse beyond recognition. "Shinchinghe, you're right. I was after the Gu family all along. My mom worked as a maid for the Gu family for 6 years, slaving away, only to be kicked out with nothing. The Gu family owes us. I just wanted to take back what's mine. What's wrong with that?" Her voice carried a near-mad obsession as she spoke. She scrambled to her feet, staggering to stand upright, staring at me with a twisted smile plastered on her lips. "Shinchinghe, you're lucky, born a rich heiress, living in a mansion, riding in luxury cars, marrying whoever you want, but me, after my mom was fired, she couldn't find a job, we rented the cheapest places. She suffered her whole life, and she was gone before she turned 50. I've known since I was a kid that we could have had a good life. The Gu family ruined everything. Her voice grew more frantic, echoing through the banquet hall like a desperate beast howling. She turned, pointing at Tao Rulin, and shrieked, "Tao Rulin, why couldn't you let my mom go back then? She only took a few things. Your family is loaded. Did you really need those things? You kicked her out. Do you even know what kind of life she lived afterward?" Tao Rulin stood still, her expression shifting from shock to icy coldness. She walked toward Louis, each step steady and heavy. Reaching her, she raised her hand and slapped her hard across the face. Smack. The sound was crisp and loud. Louis's head snapped to the side, and she collapsed back onto the floor, holding her cheek. She looked up at Tao Rulin in shock, her mouth wide open. But no words came out. Tao Rulin looked down at her, her voice cold as ice. "Your mother stole things, that was her fault. I handed her over to the police, and she should have gone to jail. I let it go out of mercy. You use your mother's suffering as an excuse to get close to my son, trick him into marriage, and try to take over the Gu family's assets. You think you're pitiful, you don't deserve it." She turned to face the guests, her voice regaining the composure of a matriarch. "Everyone, the Gu family has never done anything wrong. 30 years ago, Lu Meifeng's theft was reported to the police, and the records are still there. Today, Louis tried to defraud the Gu family of its property, and we have evidence for that too. The Gu family will handle this through legal means, no leniency." After saying this, she glanced at me. That look held gratitude, apology, and a complex kind of approval. She nodded slightly, then turned and walked back to her seat. I crouched down, looking at Louis, who was still slumped on the floor. She held her face, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed, but through the gaps between her fingers, her eyes were still fixed on me, filled with resentment and hatred. I lowered my voice, speaking softly enough that only the two of us could hear. "Louis, do you know where you lost? You've always hated others for having better luck than you, but you've never once thought that your mother stealing was wrong, or that you deceiving people is wrong. You blame all your misfortune on others, never reflecting on yourself. You think you're pitiful, so you feel justified in doing anything bad, but no one owes you, Louis, no one ever has." With that, I stood up, smoothed the hem of my wedding dress, and turned to walk towards Xia Yannan. Xia Yannan was waiting for me below the stage. He reached out his hand, and I naturally took it. His palm was dry and warm, firmly wrapping around my fingers. He glanced down at me, the corner of his mouth curving slightly. "Qinghe, how long did it take you to investigate the bracelet?" 3 months, from the first day I knew about Louis. I started looking into it. He gently squeezed my hand and said nothing more. At that moment, a steady sound of footsteps came from the entrance of the banquet hall. Everyone turned to look, and saw 2 police officers in uniform standing at the door, followed by a few auxiliary officers. The leading officer scanned the room, his gaze finally landing on Louis, who was slumped on the floor. He stepped forward, looked down at Louis, then pulled a piece of paper from his briefcase, unfolded it, and spoke in a steady, formal tone. "Miss Louis, you are suspected of forging medical documents, obtaining marriage and property through fraud, and being involved in a theft case from 30 years ago involving your mother, Lu Meifeng. Please come with us to cooperate with the investigation." Louis jerked her head up, her expression shifting from despair to terror. She scrambled backward, her voice sharp and shrill. "No, I don't want to go to jail. Mingxiu, save me." But Gu Mingxiu wasn't there. In the entire banquet hall, no one stepped forward to say a word for her. 2 female auxiliary officers approached, one on each side, grabbing her arms. Louis struggled a few times, but her strength wasn't enough to break free. As they dragged her toward the door, she twisted her head violently, her eyes locked on me, burning with a mad hatred. She gritted her teeth and said, "Shin Qinghe, just you wait, I won't let you off." I looked at her, my tone calm. "Miss Lu, we'll talk when you get out." The police took her away. The doors of the banquet hall closed again, sealing off the desperate cries outside. The hall fell silent for a few seconds, then Shan was the first to raise his glass, standing up and lifting it to the whole room. "Everyone, the show's over, but the wine isn't finished. Today is my daughter's big day. No one leaves. Drink up." The room erupted in laughter and applause, the atmosphere buzzing back to life. the band struck up the music again, and the guests raised their glasses, clinking and chatting as if everything that had just happened was just a piece of entertainment. But I knew, this wasn't a show, this was the first battle Xia Yannan and I had won together. Chapter 9, The Final Reckoning. After the police took Louis away, the atmosphere in the banquet hall felt like it had been scrubbed clean. The band struck up the music again, the guests continued to clink glasses and laugh, filling the hall with noise, but everyone knew the night wasn't over yet, because one person had been absent from start to finish. Gu Mingxiu. He had followed Tao Roland out and never returned. No one knew where he went, and no one asked. Most of the Gu family's relatives had already left, and the few who remained sat together, their faces grim, occasionally whispering to each other as if discussing how to handle what came next. I stood by the main table with a glass in my hand, Xia Yannan's hand resting on my waist. He leaned down, his lips near my ear. Qinghe, Gu Mingxiu hasn't left yet. I saw him standing at the door a moment ago, but Aunt Gu pulled him away. He should still be in the hotel. I nodded, my tone flat. I know. He still has something to say to me. He'll come back. Xia Yannan glanced at me, didn't ask further, just tightened his grip slightly. Sure enough, about 20 minutes later, the banquet hall door was pushed open. This time, the force was light. The two doors opened just a crack, then slowly widened, revealing Gu Mingxiu's figure. He had changed clothes. The wrinkled white shirt was replaced by a dark gray suit jacket, and his hair had been tidied, but the exhaustion and defeat on his face were impossible to hide. His eyes were still red, bloodshot, and a stubble of blue-black beard had sprouted on his chin. He looked like he had aged 10 years. He stood at the door, not rushing in, just sweeping his gaze across the room until it landed on me. That look was complicated. Regret, reluctance, guilt, and a kind of pleading that words couldn't capture. Tao Roland saw him come in, set down her teacup, and stood up to walk over. Gu Mingxiu shook his head at her, his voice hoarse. Mom, let me handle this myself. Tao Roland stopped in her tracks, paused for 2 seconds, then sat back down. Gu Mingxiu took a deep breath and walked toward me, step by step. His pace wasn't fast, but every step felt like treading on knives. The surrounding guests parted to make way, all eyes fixed on him. He stopped 3 steps away from me, not looking at Xia Yannan, not looking at anyone else, just at me. Qinghe, I want to say a few words to you, just a few. Xia Yannan shifted slightly. I pressed my hand against his, signaling it was fine. Then I turned to face Gu Mingxiu and said, in a calm tone, go ahead. Gu Mingxiu opened his mouth. His Adam's apple bobbed several times before he finally forced out the words. Qinghe, the stupidest thing I've ever done in my life was losing you. I looked at him and said nothing. He let out a bitter laugh and continued, I stood outside today and thought through a lot of things, from the first time I met you, to our engagement, to when I met Louis, to when I secretly got the marriage certificate with her, to today, you standing here in your wedding dress next to Xia Yannan. I went through the whole circle, and in the end, I came to one conclusion. He paused, his voice growing hoarser. I'm a bastard. I nodded lightly. You really are. Gu Mingxiu laughed. That laugh was bitter, uglier than crying. He lowered his head, rubbed his face with his palms, then lifted it again, his eyes redder than before. Qinghe, do you know what I hate most about myself? It's not that I was fooled, not that I lost my inheritance, not even that I dragged the Gu family down like this. What I hate most is that I once had you, and I didn't know how to cherish it. I thought you were a given, that no matter what I did, you'd always be there waiting for me. But by the time I came to my senses, you were already gone. His voice started trembling, but he gritted his teeth and pushed on. Louis tricked me, I admit it, I was blind, but Qinghe, can you tell me, from start to finish, did you ever like me, even just a little? After he asked that question, the entire banquet hall fell silent. A few guests who were toasting froze mid-motion, their glasses suspended in the air. Shinjin Shan set down his chopsticks, his brow furrowing slightly. Tao Roland sat in her seat, closing her eyes as if embarrassed for her son. I was silent for a few seconds, then spoke. My tone was calm, like I was stating an indifferent fact. Gu Mingxiu, we were engaged for 2 years. In those 2 years, how many times were you late? Have you ever counted? You promised to come with me to try on wedding dresses. I waited 3 hours for you, and in the end, you texted saying something came up. You promised to have New Year's Eve dinner at the Shin family's. I had the kitchen prepare a whole table of dishes, and you ended up going skiing with Louis without even calling. You promised to come with me to the hospital to see my sick grandmother. I waited alone downstairs for an hour and a half, and you sent a message saying, "It's too far." Another day. That day was the last time my grandmother was lucid enough to call my name. The next day, she was in the ICU. And you never showed up once. Gu Mingxiu's face turned pale inch by inch. His mouth hung open, his lips trembling, but no words came out. I continued, "You asked if I ever liked you, Gu Mingxiu." "I did, back when you hadn't made lateness a habit, back when you occasionally remembered my birthday, back before you met Louis, but feelings like that need to be cherished. What did you take my liking for you as? Something that would never disappear, no matter how much you trampled on it. You were wrong." I took half a step forward, looking into his eyes. My voice wasn't loud, but every word was crystal clear. Liking someone can be exhausted. When you've collected enough disappointment, it's gone. It didn't vanish in one day, it vanished day by day. Every time you were late, every time you didn't answer my calls, every time you put me last on your list of priorities, you were draining it. By the time you betrayed me in the stupidest way possible, that little bit of liking had long been drained dry. Gu Mingxiu's tears finally fell. He didn't wipe them away, he just stood there, tears streaming down his cheeks, drop by drop, landing on his suit jacket, leaving dark, wet spots. His lips trembled violently, and his voice squeezed out of his throat, broken and halting. "Qinghe, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I really know I was wrong. I'm not asking for anything anymore. I just want you to forgive me. Can you?" I watched him cry, watched him collapse in front of me, like a building whose foundation had been ripped out, crashing down, fragments scattering everywhere. Then I gently shook my head. "Gu Mingxiu, I don't hate you anymore. You should know that not hating and forgiving are two different things. I don't hate you because I no longer care about you. Whatever you've done has nothing to do with me. As for forgiveness, I don't think you need mine. What you need is to forgive yourself." After saying that, I turned around and took Xia Yinnan's hand again. Xia Yinnan looked down at me, a faint glimmer in his eyes. He didn't say a word, just tightened his grip on my hand. Gu Mingxiu shouted from behind me, his voice almost a roar, "Qinghe, if I hadn't done that half a year ago, if I hadn't met Louis, would we be married by now?" I stopped walking but didn't turn around. "Gu Mingxiu, there's no if in this world. You made your choice, and now you have to face the consequences." It was as if those words had shattered him. He stumbled back a step, his back hitting the edge of the table, then slowly slid down until he was crouching on the floor. He didn't cry out loud anymore, but his shoulders were shaking violently, his whole body curled up like an animal abandoned in the rain. Tao Rulin stood up from her seat. She walked over to her son, bent down, and gently placed a hand on his back. Her movements were light, but the expression on her face was a forced calm. She glanced at me, gave a slight nod, then lowered her head and said something in a voice only she and Gu Mingxiu could hear. "Get up, you're the son of the Gu family. Even if you've done wrong, you don't crouch on the ground." Gu Mingxiu didn't move. Tao Rulin repeated herself, her tone heavier. "Gu Mingxiu, get up." He finally stood up slowly. His face was streaked with tears, his eyes swollen and red, making him look utterly pathetic. He turned to face Shan, bowed deeply, and stayed bent over for a long time without straightening up. "Uncle Shan, I'm sorry." Shan sat in his seat, stared at him for 3 seconds, then stood up, raised his glass, and clinked it in the air toward him. "Young people taking a wrong turn isn't anything unusual, but what you lost on that wrong road, you have to earn back yourself. I won't drink this glass with you. When you've propped up the Gu family again, come find me at the Shan residence, then I'll drink 3 glasses with you." Shan's words were harsh, but everyone present could hear the leeway hidden in them. The Gu family hadn't completely fallen out with the Shan family because Tao Rulin knew how to handle things, and because Shan wasn't the type to push someone to the brink. Gu Mingxiu straightened up, tears still wet in his eyes, but he gritted his teeth and nodded. Then he turned and looked at Xia Yinnan. The two locked eyes for 3 seconds. The tension in the banquet hall spiked again, everyone remembering the punch from earlier. Xia Yinnan didn't move. His expression was calm, neither provocative nor yielding. He just stood there, like a silent wall. Gu Mingxiu spoke first. His voice was hoarse but steadier than before. "Yinnan, I owe you an apology. I shouldn't have thrown that punch. You standing in front of Qinghe, you deserve her. I don't." Xia Yinnan paused for 2 seconds, then nodded. "Mingxiu, I accept your apology. If the Gu family ever needs help with anything in the future, as long as it's not a matter of principle, just say the word. Gu Mingxiu's eyes reddened again, he nodded firmly, then turned and strode toward the door. This time, he didn't stop or look back. He pushed open the banquet hall door and walked out. The door closed slowly behind him with a dull thud. Tao Rulin stared at the direction her son had gone, silent for a long moment. Then she turned and walked over to me, taking off a jade bracelet from her wrist, not the one from the photo that had been stolen, which was her mother's dowry and had been taken by Louis's mother. This was another bracelet she wore. Slightly lighter in color but equally fine in quality. She took my hand and slipped the bracelet onto my wrist. I froze for a second, about to refuse, but she pressed down on the back of my hand. Tao Rulin said, "Qinghe, this bracelet is one I bought myself, not a family heirloom of the Gu family. I'm giving it to you not as the matriarch of the Gu family, but as an elder who admires you. Everything you did today reminded me of myself when I was young. What the Gu family owes you, I can't repay in their stead. But this token of my regard, you have to accept it." I looked at the bracelet on my wrist, paused for 2 seconds, then raised my head and nodded at Tao Rulin. "Thank you, Auntie Gu." She patted the back of my hand, then turned and walked back to her seat. Xia Yannan gently wrapped an arm around my waist from behind and whispered in my ear, "Qinghe, that color on your wrist, it really suits you." I tilted my head to glance at him, the corner of my mouth curving up. "You're not asking anything, no need to ask. Whatever you do, you've got your reasons." I looked into his eyes, saw my own reflection in those deep black pupils, wearing a wedding dress, a jade bracelet on my wrist, a faint smile tugging at my lips. At that moment, I felt like I must be the happiest bride in the whole room. I rose on my tiptoes and whispered a single sentence into his ear. "Xia Yannan, marrying you is the most clear-headed decision I've ever made in my life." He froze for a second, then broke into a grin. That smile spread from the corners of his mouth to the edges of his eyes, lighting up his whole face. He tightened his arms, pulling me into his embrace, his chin resting on the top of my head, his voice so low that only I could hear. "Qinghe, I've been waiting for that line for a whole year." Chapter 10, Your Retribution, My Rebirth. After Louis was taken away, I stood in the center of the banquet hall, feeling everyone's eyes still on me. Those gazes held shock, admiration, scrutiny, and a few barely concealed resentments from some distant relatives of the Gu family. But I didn't care anymore. Xia Yannan leaned down and murmured in my ear, "Qinghe, leave the rest to me. Take a break." I shook my head, my tone soft. "Not done yet. Tonight needs a proper ending." I let go of Xia Yannan's hand and walked over to the microphone stand beside the band. The MC, seeing me approach, quickly handed me the mic, his face a mix of nerves and excitement. I took it, turned to face the whole room, and cleared my throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for coming to celebrate mine and Yannan's wedding tonight. I know a lot has happened today, some expected, some unexpected, but there's one thing I want to make crystal clear in front of everyone." The banquet hall fell silent. Shan set down his wine glass. Tao Rulin lifted her head. Xia Yannan stood still, his gaze steady on me. My engagement to Gu Mingxiu was arranged by both families. I respected that arrangement and took that relationship seriously, but the moment I found out that Gu Mingxiu had secretly gotten married to Louis abroad while our engagement was still on, I chose to call it off immediately, not out of spite, not as revenge, because I, Qinghe, refuse to spend my life with someone who can't stay faithful. I paused, my eyes sweeping across the room. No one spoke, all eyes were on me. I went on, "After the engagement was broken, Yannan and I got together. That was our choice, open, honest, and clean. If anyone thinks I broke off the engagement and remarried just to get back at Gu Mingxiu, then you're underestimating me. My life doesn't revolve around any man. Every decision I make is because I want to, not to piss anyone off." My tone hardened on the last sentence. A few scattered claps broke out from the crowd, then more and more, growing louder. Shan was the first to stand and applaud, his palms clapping sharp and crisp, his face brimming with undisguised pride. Xia Zhongyuan stood up too, Zhou Min holding her husband's arm, her eyes slightly red but her lips curved into a smile. Xia Yannan walked over from the crowd and naturally took his place beside me. He reached out and wrapped an arm around my waist, the gesture light, like a habit he'd long perfected. He tilted his head to look at me, his eyes full of tenderness, trust, and an unspoken understanding. He leaned slightly toward the mic in my hand and said, "Everyone, me, Xia Yannan, marrying Qinghe is the greatest luck of my life. Whatever she says, goes." The whole room erupted in Warm laughter and applause. Someone shouted, "Good one." Groom, and another person whistled. The atmosphere finally shifted from the earlier tension to pure celebration. The band struck up an exit tune at just the right moment. Xia Nan and I held our glasses and made the final round of toasts, surrounded by the guests. Shan, his face flushed with drink, grabbed Xia Nan's hand and rambled on about how if you ever dare bully my daughter, I'll buy out your company and the like. Xia Nan listened intently, nodding over and over, his demeanor so docile it was almost comical. Zhou Min stood nearby, wiping tears and laughing at the same time, holding my hand and saying her biggest regret in life was not having a daughter, but now that gap was filled. Tao Rulin was the last to leave. She stood at the entrance of the banquet hall, Gu Mingxian behind her. Gu Mingxian had barely spoken all night, but now she stepped up to me, extended her hand, and shook mine. Xin Qinghe, thank you for not grinding the Gu family into the dirt. If you ever need anything from me, just say the word. I looked into her eyes and nodded seriously. Gu Mingxian was the most clear-headed person in the Gu family, and I knew her words weren't just politeness. Tao Rulin stood beside me for a moment, watching me, then reached out and gently adjusted a crooked pearl flower on my veil. Her movements were meticulous, as if handling a precious piece of porcelain. After fixing it, she took a step back, gave a slight nod, and turned to leave. I watched her figure disappear at the end of the corridor, and a complicated feeling suddenly rose in my heart. This old woman had publicly crippled her own son tonight, admitted the Gu family's mistakes in front of the city's elite, and piece by piece salvaged the family's honor. Every decision she made felt like cutting her own flesh with a knife, but she never shed a single tear from start to finish. I didn't want to use the word admire, but I had to admit, Tao Rulin was the toughest matriarch I had ever seen. By the time the banquet ended, it was already late at night. Xia Nan and I stood at the hotel entrance seeing off the last batch of guests. The night breeze blew in, carrying the chill of early autumn. Xia Nan took off his suit jacket and draped it over my shoulders. It smelled faintly of pine wood, warm and comforting. Xia Nan said, "Qinghe, are you tired?" "Not really. Now that everything that needed to be done is done, I actually feel a huge weight lifted." He smiled, then reached out and tucked a strand of wind-tangled hair behind my ear. His fingertips brushed against my earlobe, cool to the touch, but the gesture was gentle. "Come on, the wedding car is waiting." I nodded and was about to turn when the corner of my eye caught a familiar figure. At the edge of the hotel parking lot, under a ginkgo tree, stood Gu Mingxiu. He hadn't left. He leaned against the trunk, hands in his pockets, staring from a distance in my and Xia Nan's direction. The streetlight hit his face, illuminating his expression clearly, a quiet, almost blank look, no anger, no resentment, just quiet watching. He didn't walk over, didn't say a word, he just stood there, as if completing some kind of ritual. Xia Nan saw him too. He tilted his head to glance at me and said softly, "Do you want to go say a few words to him?" I was silent for 2 seconds, then shook my head. Everything that needed to be said has already been said. I took Xia Nan's arm and turned to walk toward the wedding car waiting at the end of the red carpet. The driver saw us coming and quickly opened the door. Xia Nan helped me into the car, then walked around to the other side and got in. The moment the door closed, I glanced through the window toward the ginkgo tree again. Gu Mingxiu was still there, shadows falling over him, enveloping him in a dim haze. Then the car started moving. His figure grew smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror, eventually melting into the night, until I couldn't see him anymore. I leaned my head against Xia Nan's shoulder and closed my eyes. His shoulder was broad, solid and reassuring. His hand found my fingers and gently held them, his thumb brushing back and forth over the ring on my ring finger twice. Xia Nan said, "Qinghe, from today on, you're Mrs. Xia." I smiled with my eyes still closed. "Mr. Xia, I look forward to your guidance from now on." "No, it's you guiding me. I'll learn well." I opened my eyes and looked at him. He was looking at me too. The light inside the car was dim, but his eyes were bright, as if they held stars. I suddenly remembered that night a year ago at the engagement banquet, when I stood outside the hotel in my gown, freezing in the cold wind. He walked over and draped his jacket over my shoulders without saying a word, just quietly standing beside me, waiting for the Shin family's car. The wind was strong that night, my teeth chattering from the cold, but his jacket had a clean, soapy scent that inexplicably made me feel at ease. Later, when I got into the car, I turned back to look at him. He stood alone on the hotel steps, the streetlight stretching his shadow long. That image stayed with me for an entire year, and now, this man was sitting right beside me, holding my hand, becoming my husband. Xiaoyan Nan, I want to ask you something. Go ahead. A year ago at the engagement banquet, when you draped your jacket over me, what were you thinking? Xiaoyan Nan was silent for a moment, then let out a soft laugh. I was thinking, is Gu Mingxiu blind, a girl this wonderful, and he actually let her stand in the wind waiting? I froze for a second, then laughed too. That's it. No. I also thought, if I ever got the chance, I would never let her wait for anyone again, not even for a second. The car drove steadily through the night, the streetlights outside retreating one by one, sliding past the window like streams of light. Inside, the stereo played a very old English song, the volume turned low, spreading through the air like a thin layer of water. Xiaoyan Nan held my hand, his fingertips gently stroking my ring, circling it over and over, as if confirming something. I leaned against his shoulder and slowly closed my eyes. So much had happened tonight, but my heart was oddly calm. Those feelings of anger, grievance, and resentment had been digested clean over the past 6 months. Tonight, I wasn't here for revenge. I was here to settle accounts, to tally up old debts one by one, and then move forward cleanly. About half an hour later, the car turned onto a road I didn't quite recognize. I sat up straight and glanced out the window, realizing this wasn't the direction back to the Xia family's old mansion, nor the route to the new house. I turned to look at Xiaoyan Nan. Going somewhere, he said. You'll know when we get there. The car stopped in front of an old-fashioned villa. It wasn't big, just 2 stories, with red brick walls covered in ivy, glowing with a soft green hue under the streetlights. In the yard stood a large osmanthus tree, with a wicker swing chair beneath it, and beside it, a flower bed bursting with white and pale purple hydrangeas. Xiaoyan Nan took my hand and led me out of the car. He pushed open the iron gate of the yard and walked to the villa's front door. From his pocket, he pulled out a key and placed it in my palm. Qinghe, this house, I bought it with the first income from my own business. It has nothing to do with the Xia family. The deed only has my name on it. From today, I'm adding yours. I looked down at the key in my palm, the silver metal gleaming coldly under the streetlight. The key was light, but in my hand, it carried a heavy weight, not because of how much it cost, but because it represented someone willing to place his whole world in your hands. Xiaoyan Nan said, I didn't discuss it with you beforehand because I wanted it to be a surprise. The Xia family mansion is too big, with too many eyes. I know you're not comfortable there. Here, it's just the 2 of us. You can decorate it however you want. The hydrangeas in the yard were planted by me, the osmanthus tree was left by the previous owner, and the swing chair was installed just last week. In the master bedroom on the 2nd floor, the window faces south. The morning sun is great, and you can see the mountains in the distance. He paused, his voice softening. Qinghe, I know you don't like being arranged, but this house isn't an arrangement, it's my heart. Will you take it? I stared at the key in my hand, silent for a long moment. Then I looked up at him, and a slow smile spread across my lips. Xiaoyan Nan, how did you know I love hydrangeas? He froze for a second, then smiled a little sheepishly. Last year, you posted a moment on WeChat, a photo of the hydrangeas in the Shin family's yard, saying they were your favorite flower. I screenshotted that post and kept it until today. I looked at him, and suddenly my nose stung, but I didn't cry. I just stepped forward 2 paces, rose on my tiptoes, and gently kissed his cheek. The kiss was light, like a feather landing on the surface of water. Thank you, Mr. Xia. This house, I love it. He wrapped his arm around my waist, pulling me into his embrace, and pressed a kiss to my forehead. His lips were warm and dry, the touch on my skin feeling like a vow. Qinghe, welcome home. I leaned into his arms and closed my eyes. The osmanthus tree in the yard swayed gently in the night breeze, rustling softly. The air carried a faint floral scent, mingled with the smell of earth and grass. The distant mountains dissolved into a hazy silhouette in the darkness, standing quietly like silent guardians. I knew that from this moment on, Qinghe's new life had truly begun. 3 months later, Louis's case was sentenced in the first trial, for forging medical documents, fraudulently obtaining marriage and property through deception, and her involvement in the 30-year-old Liu Meifang theft case. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison and deprived of political rights for 2 years. Zhao Ziyuan, as an accomplice, was sentenced to 1 year in prison, suspended for 1 year, for aiding in document forgery and perjury. I didn't go to court that day. Xiaoyan Nan asked if I wanted to watch, and I said no. The things that needed to end had already ended on the wedding day. I'm no saint. I won't hypocritically say I hope she reforms. She did evil, and she has to pay the price. After the verdict, Gu Mingxiu went to the detention center to see Louis once. According to Gu Mingxian, the two sat across a glass partition in the visiting room, holding phones, and talked for less than 3 minutes. Louis cried the entire time, kept saying she was wrong, begging him for another chance. Gu Mingxiu put down the phone, stood up, and walked away without looking back. From then on, he never mentioned the name Louis again. Over at the Gu family, Tao Rulin kept her word and completely revoked Gu Mingxiu's inheritance rights. Gu Mingxian took over most of the Gu Group's operations, and on her first day, she kicked off the auction for the 3 plots of land in the south of the city. The Shen family snapped up 2 of them, the Xia family took 1, and after the auction ended, the 3 families even sat down for a meal together. The scene is harmonious as if they were one big family. Gu Mingxiu was demoted to an obscure subsidiary under the Gu Group, starting from the ground up as a project manager. No company car, no driver, he clocked in and out like any regular employee. Gu Mingxian once sent me a message, saying he was at the office working until dawn, sitting alone in his room munching on bread in front of his computer, having lost a ton of weight, but his work was decent. After reading that message, I replied with just 4 words, he deserves it. Gu Mingxian sent back a wry smile emoji, then said, I think so too. Xia Yinnan's studio landed a huge project after my wedding, keeping him swamped, but no matter how late it got, he always came home for dinner. He said it was a matter of principle. I teased him, saying, when did you get so fussy? He replied seriously, because after marrying you, I realized there's nothing in this world more important than having dinner with you, Mr. Xia. That's way too cheesy. I mean it. Fine, I believe him. A month ago, I moved my company to the office next to Xia Yinnan's studio. The 2 rooms are separated only by a glass wall. When he's in a meeting, I can look up and see him. When I'm on a business call, he's always half listening while flipping through documents. Sometimes at noon, he'll push open my door with a sandwich in hand, say nothing, just sit on the sofa and eat quietly. Sunlight streams in through the window, falling on his profile, warming half of his face. At that moment, I thought, this is probably what happiness is, not the grand vows of eternal love, not the heart-wrenching entanglements of love and hate. It's coming home every day after work to find someone waiting for you in the yard. It's lying in bed at night, feeling someone's hand naturally wrap around you. It's the kitchen always having hot water for 2, the osmanthus blooming and filling the whole yard with fragrance, the distant mountains visible when you push open the window. It's Xia Yinnan. 3 months into Louis' prison sentence, I received a letter. The return address on the envelope was the city's women's prison. The paper was a page torn from a notebook, edges rough and frayed, covered in writing. The handwriting was messy and forceful, some spots blurred by water stains, making it hard to read. The letter was short, just a few lines. Chinchinghe, I've done a lot of thinking in here. I hated you, and I still hate you now, but I don't blame you anymore. You were right. No one owes me anything. My mom stealing was her fault, and me lying was my fault. I shouldn't have pinned all my mistakes on others. I owe you, and I might never be able to pay it back in this life, but I want you to know I regret it, not for going against you, but for wasting my own time, living 30 years in hatred. When I get out, I want to try living again. I finished reading the letter, folded it, put it back in the envelope, and tucked it into the deepest drawer. Xia Yinnan doesn't know about this letter. I didn't tell him, and I didn't mention it to anyone. Some things don't need to be shared. It's a person's regret fallen into the mud. Maybe it's real, maybe it's just a confession forced out by prison life. Either way, it has nothing to do with me anymore. My life, from the moment that wedding ended, has already turned the page. It's another weekend evening. Xia Yinnan is watering the flowers in the yard, and I'm sitting on the swing chair under the osmanthus tree, an unfinished book spread across my lap. The sunset sinks from the west, dyeing the entire sky a burnt orange, the distant mountains blurred in the twilight. The osmanthus trees are in full bloom, and when the wind blows, tiny petals fall in a rustling shower, landing on my hair and the pages. Xia Yinnan turns off the hose, walks over, and sits down beside me. He reaches out and picks the osmanthus petals off my hair, one by one, moving slowly and carefully, as if he's doing something monumental. Chinghe, don't you think there are more and more flowers in the yard lately? That's all thanks to you watering them every day. He shook his head and let out a laugh. That smile looked especially beautiful in the sunset, his eyes curving into crescents, the corners of his mouth lifting just slightly, warm enough to make you want to keep watching forever. It wasn't my doing. When a flower is meant to bloom, it just does. He paused, then turned his head to look at me, his eyes holding the last glimmer of the setting sun. Chingha, we're both going to get better and better. I leaned back against the swing chair, watching the last streak of orange-red slowly fade from the sky, watching the outline of the distant mountains grow deeper, watching the hydrangeas in the courtyard quietly close their petals in the twilight. Then I nodded gently. Yes, we're both going to get better and better. Gumingxiu, Louis, all those tangled grievances, they've all been washed away by time, their edges blurred beyond recognition. Shinchingha's new life began the moment she walked into this red brick villa side by side with Xie Nan, and all the pain and betrayal were left outside that iron gate, forever, turned over. The end.